choose to do with said property. That has nothing to do with an American viewpoint. Chickens are quiet and when taken care of properly, do not smell enough to bother neighbors. And I would invite council members to walk down our street and determine which property would be ours based on smell alone. Aylmer is a rural farming community and should support its residents in wanting to grow and sustain their own food sources. We have collected 160 signatures of other Aylmer residents who fully support being able to own backyard chickens in less than 1 week. And I have been informed by bylaw that also the maximum amount of cats someone is allowed to own is 3. And I'm sure we all know someone who has 4. I'm sure we all know someone who has an 8-foot fence when what is permitted is 6. Yet we let these things slide. I'm sure how a resident's right to own chickens, I'm not sure how a resident's right to own chickens can cost the town's taxpayers any more than the enforcement cost of having the bylaw in the first place. And if the council has also delegated just as much money into enforcing 6-foot fencing and not 8, and ensuring families have no more than 3 cats or 3 dogs. The best possible outcome here would be to eliminate the bylaw restricting residents from owning chickens, but as I've come to know some council members this past week, I don't believe some of you are capable of giving up your need for control. And as a compromise, I propose a limit on chickens based on property size, or allowing, let's say, 2 chickens per family member. I feel frustrated as it seems some of you don't think these changes can be made, even though it is what you were elected to do so. Listen to the wants and ideas of myself and the other 150 Aylmer residents who want or support the right to own backyard chickens. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay, for your presentation. Are there any questions from council for Lindsay? I don't see any hands. Oh, sorry, Councillor Charlton, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation, Lindsay. I know food sustainability and shortages are a concern sometimes, and I know I've heard from a couple of food banks that the working class, middle class, are using food banks. So growing your own food is a good idea. I don't know if it's a sustainable idea, but I know there are people that didn't think they would have to use food banks, and now they are having to use them. The cost of food, price of fuel, rent, everything's going up, and this is just a way that they can keep the grocery bill down. So that's just my thought. I don't particularly agree with it, but I can see that it may be something that we have to deal with as a community if people want to produce more and more of their own food. Thank you.
If I may respond.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
This is not by any means an accessibility issue to food. This is a preference, as there are many residents who would prefer to have backyard chickens as opposed to, let's say, a swimming pool.
Okay, are there any other questions for Lindsay? Councillor Barber, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think there has to be some kind of rationale between what's reasonable and what is achievable to allow anything in mass without some kind of oversight as to what's happening. I think would be just as bad as trying to throw a blanket over anything. But I think in the background material that was presented, there were some valid points within that. I think space has to be one concern. There's a huge variety in the size of various lots throughout the town. And if you're talking just the chickens' well-being, I don't think it's appropriate to have them on any more space than would be required, that like a minimum amount of space as compared to having enough room to move properly and in good health. So whichever direction that we take on this, it has to be, first of all, with an open mind. And secondly, not everybody, based on property size, if nothing else, should have free rein to have farm animals. Councillor Charlton mentioned that we are in an agricultural community, which is certainly well thought out. But there are animals larger than chickens that, if you open up the floodgates, that would not be appropriate within the boundaries of the town of Aylmer.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barber. Councillor Oslach, go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship. I used to always raise chickens on the farm, and Simcoe, basically. I had a farm, a nursery actually, and I always kept my laying hens in cages, not penned, and they had a run, but it was a limited run outside, and I always kept my chickens clean and the nest clean and everything else. I was using them for laying hens, basically. And basically, to have laying hens, I have a lot of things on laying hens, but over the years, basically, it's cheaper to go to the grocery store and buy your eggs, or to the farmer next door to buy your eggs, because I found that the grain and mash and the upkeep and unless you really prefer chickens, I'm not talking about meat chickens, eggs, but I think basically I grow all my own vegetables in the backyard. Basically, I supply the whole neighborhood with vegetables. There's no law against growing vegetables, basically. But I think the administrator puts out a survey every summer for the 2023 budget. Maybe one of the questions, one of the suggestions or questions on that survey, what the residents think about chickens in Aylmer. It's just a thought. It's a suggestion, and maybe Andy will condemn me for that, but it's just a thought. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
Andy, did you have any further comments?
Thank you, Mayor French. No, just in general, that if certainly council can direct us to go back and to do a report with something like backyard chickens, I would suggest that we do public consultation, and certainly right now we don't have a planner, so I would want a planner on staff before we really got into this issue. So it is something that can be done, but I think it would likely end up coming to the next term of council. The animal control bylaw is a 1988 bylaw. This has remained unchanged since 1988. So I do think staff are very aware that we should go through it and sit down and do some amendments. But generally, just to build on what Councillor Oshkosh was saying, the cost in any jurisdiction that allows chickens, there is associated costs with it. You need a chicken coop, you need fencing, you need to have the manure stored separately. So when you start talking about the cost of the infrastructure and the requirements that we'd have, it's almost like you're heading down a route of more regulation rather than less regulation. So it is one of those things where I don't know how happy we would be able to make all parties in the issue. But we'll do whatever council wants.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Are there any further questions or comments?
If I may respond.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
To clarify for Andy, I was not expecting taxpayer dollars to build my coop, and I was not expecting taxpayer dollars to maintain our property. We do that on our own. This is more of an experience. It's not for financial gain. It's not because we can't afford eggs. It's not because we can't accept eggs. It's because we are trying to raise our son in a simpler place with simpler means and to do more things ourselves than to rely so much on factory farmed eggs and factory farmed this and factory farmed that.
Okay, thank you,
No.
Lindsay.
And sorry,
did you have
just to-
another comment, Andy? Go ahead.
Yeah, just to briefly clarify, we weren't suggesting that I wasn't suggesting that taxpayers would pay for it. It's just usually there's certain specifications on types of coops that you can get and the size and inspections for the health and safety of those inspecting and determining that the coop and the conditions would fall on the municipality as part of the regulation. So it wasn't actually purchasing the equipment, but I understand your points.
Well, maybe next time bylaw comes by my house, they can examine the coop and determine if it's large enough for a chicken to be in.
Councillor Osladge, do you have a question?
Yes, Your Worship. I was surfing Wayfair a day or so ago about chicken coops. You can get all kinds of chicken coops on Wayfair, and probably you can get them at the Home Building Center, at Seacords or whatever, at Lowe's maybe. But I had chickens on the farm, and they make actually good pets. I had 10 laying hens, and they were all named, and basically they would come to me, and they make good pets. But I'm not encouraging anybody to raise chickens in Elmer because I think it's against the bylaw. And I agree with Andy that the bylaw should be revised because we went through this a couple of councils ago about people having cockatoos in the backyard and the aviary and show rabbits and show doves and they basically I think I think my suggestion for Andy was put the question on the survey this summer. What the residents think about chickens in Elmer, nay or nay. Yeah, that's my comments.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Osladge. Are there any further questions or comments?
Just one more thing.
Okay, go ahead.
We've already done the work for Andy, and we've petitioned the town and have received 160 signatures in less than a week in support of. I don't know what it would look like a month from now, but I'm just saying that's how long it's been. It's less than a week and we've gotten 160. And I would also have to agree that yes, chickens do make good pets, and my 6-year-old would definitely agree.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Lindsay, for coming this evening. And we appreciate your comments.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Josh, do you have a resolution, please?
That the delegation from Lindsay Giesbrecht regarding backyard chickens be received as information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second, please. Councillor Charlton and Councillor Barber, are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is adoption of council and committee minutes. Minutes to approve.
That council approves the following minutes. Regular virtual meeting of council held on March 16th, 2022.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Charlton and Councillor Osladge, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Minutes to receive.
That council receives the following minutes. Meeting of Elgin County Council held on March 8th, 2022. Meeting of Main Street Elmer BIA held on February 17th, 2022. And meeting of the Elmer Police Services Board held on February 8th, 2022.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ham and Councillor Chapman, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried, thank you. The next item up is consent agenda, items 7.1 to 7.6.
That items 7.1 to 7.6 of the April 6th, 2022 consent agenda be received for information with actions to be taken as noted.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Barber, are there any questions or concerns with the consent agenda? Deputy Mayor Andrews, go ahead.
Thank you. No questions or concerns, just a comment. The Elmer Police Service Annual Report is the first item in the consent agenda. It's quite lengthy, a lot of really great information in there. I highly recommend everyone have a chance to go through it. There's lots of stats, data, just the general goings on of the force and everyone associated to for 2021. So it's a very comprehensive review and well worth the time spent reading it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Andrews. And I have to say, I agree. There's a lot of excellent information and it's well done.
Right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or concerns? Go ahead, Councillor Charlton.
Well, I just wanted to concur as well. I went through it and there's just a lot of information there. It's well written, it's well presented, and it just makes you feel good that, yeah, we have a great police association in Elmer. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Andrews.
Are there any further comments about the consent agenda? Go ahead, Councillor Chapman.
Sorry, give me a second here. For the communications from the Terrace Lodge fundraiser, the board is working hard on raising funds to help make life within the home for the residents once the new addition is finished more appealing and more home-like. We still have a long way to go, and anyone's support is more than welcome. And we're looking for more volunteers from the community as well. And thank you, Mayor French and Warden French, for doing the fundraiser for Terrace Lodge. It's greatly appreciated that you chose us as your charity of the year. Thank you.
Well, you're most welcome, Councillor Chapman, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to do that. And I think it's going to be a wonderful event. And we're hoping to do a lot of fundraising that night for our residents. Are there any further comments or questions concerning the consent agenda? Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Seeing no other questions, all those in favor? And that's carried, thank you. We'll move into action items. The first report is Fire 05-22.
That report, Fire 05-22, entitled Elmer Fire Department Final 2021 Report, be received for information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Charlton and Councillor Chapman. And I'll turn this over to our fire chief. Good evening, Todd.
Thank you, Mayor French. Good evening, Council. I think everybody, the report outlines the activities as everybody has seen through the year. We try to keep it not all bad. There are good things that happen in the fire service as well through the year. So we try to emphasize that as well. The report's pretty much self-explanatory, and I'm here to answer any questions that anybody might have regarding it. Again, I have to thank Council for your support and your commitment to the fire department to allow us to keep the level of service that the town deserves and that they're accustomed to. And again, I do thank everybody on Council for your support of the fire department for 21.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions or comments for the chief? Well, I will say it's an excellent report and you did a great job. And I had an opportunity to come out and visit you the other day, and it was a wonderful visit, and you're doing a great job. And we have wonderful fire services here in Aylmer, so we're very fortunate.
You absolutely do.
Are there any further questions or comments about this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. And thank you, Fire Chief McComb. The next report is CAO 21-22.
That report, CAO 21-22, entitled Parks and Recreation Master Plan, RFP, be received for information, and that council approve issuance of the RFP document to allow the Parks and Rec Master Plan process to begin and for public meetings to occur in the summer and fall of 2022.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Oslach and Councillor Ham. And I'll turn this over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Mayor French. We're bringing this before council to allow you to provide input prior to issuing the RFP. The Parks and Recreation Master Plan was delayed last year due to COVID-19. And this is a project where we really want a lot of public engagement. So we didn't want to proceed last year without any in-person town halls. For us, it's really important that people feel part of this process. This is a really exciting project for the community. The proposal will outline capital projects and programming for the next decade. It does include some examinations of how to expand our service offerings at the EECC, trail extensions, bicycle lanes, and what we can do to start encouraging more special events and festivals in our community. The real value of this exercise, though, is what we hear from the public, as this is really their plan, and we want it to reflect their desires. Outside of this, I have met with the Minor Baseball Association to start work upon some improvements for the 2023 capital budget, as it's important for staff that we don't pause efforts on recreation while we wait for this work to be done. Similarly, we're going to include some funds in the 2023 capital budget to start with the sidewalk expansions, but all these factors will be presented to council before your term's over, but it will ultimately be for the incoming term of council to adopt those 2023 projects. But overall, that's just kind of stopgap while we get this work done. And then the new council right at the start of their term will have this new plan that they're kind of agreeing on that will really be the guiding document on recreation for the remainder of their term. With that, I'll try my best to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Are there any questions for Andy? Councillor Oslach first, and then Councillor Charlton.
I don't have any Your Worship, I don't have any questions. I think it is an excellent master plan, and I look forward to seeing it implemented.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oslach. Go ahead, Councillor Charlton.
Thank you. So this was done in 2004, I believe, was the last big survey. And I'm sure there were lots of great ideas generated then. I guess the town has changed substantially. I don't know if ideas have changed. We're going to spend $50,000 to have this survey done. I don't know if it's going to tell us much different information than we got the first time. And it'll all come down to budget priorities, likely. And so it's kind of a good idea, but I don't know if all the good ideas from the last survey have been done yet. And so I just kind of question I know it's been budgeted for, but I just don't feel as though all the great ideas have been achieved since the last survey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Charlton. Andy, do you have a comment?
Yes, it's through you, Councillor Mayor French, to Councillor Charlton. Yeah, we have continued to review the 2004 document. It was developed on a 10-year time frame, though, so we're already kind of well beyond the outside of it. So, and there is a lot of great ideas, but to go ahead when things like one of the top priorities was trail expansion. And to go ahead with that now without hearing from the community on things that are becoming more and more important, like bicycle lanes, would mean that we'd be, potentially spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in the wrong direction, if not millions over the term of the plan. So because of the investment, it is a good idea probably to go out and engage the public and do the engagement, but certainly it's up to council. It has been in the last 2 years capital budget to go forward.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Councillor Barber, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. With the town already increasing its residential base by hundreds, and over the next few years, several more hundred, I think it's appropriate and timely that a current survey be prepared so that you can address the priorities, not only from before, but what may be into the future. Walking paths, as an example, were not a big deal necessarily in 2004, and bike paths. But they may be now, and that's the kind of information that we really need to work on to make the future more appropriate for what the people are asking for.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. Councillor Chapman, go ahead.
For you, your worship. It's also important to have a plan, and if you don't do the research before, you don't know how to set the plan. And to move forward without any guidance would be like going on a trip with no destination. It gets you wherever you end up. And if you don't have a plan and put things in place, then you may not hit the needs of the community, or you may, as Andy said, spend money where it's not warranted and lack spending money where it is warranted. So I think a plan is extremely important.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chapman. Are there any further comments from council or questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is CAO 22-22.
That report CAO 22-22 entitled Mileage Rate Adjustment be received for information, and that council adopt the revised mileage rate bylaw as presented.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Charlton and Deputy Mayor Andrews, and I'll turn it back over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Mayor French. So the way the town's policy worked around mileage in the current bylaw is that the CAO was enabled to make adjustments. I don't generally feel comfortable with myself doing that, which is why I brought this report forward to council. We are suggesting an increase, the first one in a long number of years. I think it's important to increase because of the cost of gas, obviously. Generally, mileage benefits the town because it avoids us purchasing our own vehicles, to the ability to have staff sometimes use their vehicles to do things for the town is generally beneficial for us. We are suggesting going up to 55 cents per liter. I believe the standard kind of rate around the county is 49.5 cents per liter. That is, again, quite low. So I think there will be a lot of other municipalities that will adjust it upwards. And we also have a bit less usage of mileage. If you can think of some of our neighbors, they have greater distances to cover where we don't. So our budget is relatively small for this. So there isn't a lot of financial impact to us for this change. And with that, I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Are there any questions for Andy? Councillor Charlton, go ahead.
So that's 55 cents per kilometer, not per liter. It's 55 cents a kilometer, yes. So you mentioned liters a couple of times, so.
Sorry, apologies.
I know gas is running rampant, but yeah, let's get it right, eh?
Are there any other comments or questions from council? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. The next report is Clerk 11-22.
That report, Clerk 11-22, respecting Earth Day request, April 22nd, 2022, be received as information, and that council endorses the purchase and planting of an American sycamore tree in Optimist Park to observe Earth Day 2022.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Oslach and Councillor Chapman. And I'll turn it back over to you, Josh.
Certainly, through you, your worship, and 2 members of council. Typically, this is an initiative that would have been championed by the town's Environmental Advisory Committee. However, as council's aware, that committee is temporarily suspended initially as a result of COVID-19 disruptions. And at this point, with us nearing the conclusion of the current term of council, it's not been reinstated at this point. So as a result, staff are recommending that council endorse the purchase and planting of an American sycamore tree in Optimist Park to observe Earth Day for 2022. So the date for that is on April the 22nd. And throughout this period and sort of in the interim, staff also intend to use the town's social media platforms to participate in the Earth Day Canada media campaign, which would provide resources for citizens, schools, and businesses that are looking to take action. So it would sort of offer useful tips in terms of saving energy and different solutions in that respect. And I should also note, just as one last point, that the approximate cost of the sycamore tree is $270, and that would be funded with money that was set aside for the Environmental Advisory Committee budget. And with that, I'll answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Josh. Are there any questions for Josh? First, Councillor Charlton, then Councillor Oslach, and then Councillor Barber. Go ahead.
Josh, are these the sycamore trees that run rampant, grow rampant along the railroad lines? And my other thought was we may have a surplus of butternut trees in town, and that we could pull one out and stick our own butternut tree in the park rather than spending the $240 on an American sycamore tree. Thank you.
Josh, did you have any response for Councillor Charlton?
Certainly, through your worship, I certainly don't pretend to be a tree expert, but one point of note was, despite the name, my understanding is that an American sycamore tree would be the native Carolinian species to this area. I'm not positive. I don't believe that they're the trees that grow along the railroad lines. My understanding is sort of the basis for this recommendation was the proximity to the Catfish Creek, and sort of it being a natural complement to that area and where it would be in Optimist Park. I wouldn't be able to speak to the butternut trees. Typically, sort of in accordance with the town's tree management policy, when we have planted trees, we've sort of adhered to the standards in terms of finding trees that are an appropriate caliper, just to ensure their survival. So that's a little bit of just the rationale on what led to us selecting that tree, and a tree of that size is just trying to ensure that it does survive the winter and it ultimately grows up into a mature tree.
Good, thank you.
Councillor Oslach, you're up next.
Your worship, I can answer Councillor Charles' questions maybe appropriately, because the American sycamore, Platanus occidentalis, grows along the creek bank all the way from Elmer to Fort Bruce along Catfish Creek. It is a town tree. We had the town tree before, was the ginkgo biloba, which is a native to China. And the Environmental Committee selected the American sycamore. It was because it was, it's a huge tree. It likes wetlands. It's not growing along railroad track. I don't know what Councillor Charlton implies about the sycamore, but I've never seen it growing along the railroad tracks. I've always seen it growing in Pleasant Valley and Cherry Valley to Fort Bruce. It's a large tree. It's exfoliating bark. It's got white underneath. And if you ever see this tree, it's beautiful. It's not quite common. If you go into Catfish Creek in Pleasant Valley, Cherry Valley, or up and down Catfish Creek, you'll see the odd one, but it is not common. It is a Carolinian species. It is a town tree, and I would recommend it wholeheartedly.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oslach. Councillor Barber, you're next.
Thank you, Worship. Has a time been picked for this planting? We know the date. Is there a time?
Go ahead, Josh.
Through your worship and to Councillor Barber, pending council approval, I would work with Owen and Tom Paul and the manager of Parks and Recreation on arranging that. And we would be circulating members of council and also advertising the time on the town's social media platforms in the event that any members of the community wish to participate on Earth Day. So I would be following up pending approval, Councillor Barber.
Thank you.
Are there any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is Clerk 14-22.
That report, Clerk 14-22, respecting code of conduct for chief building official and building inspectors be received as information, and that council approves the code of conduct for chief building official and inspectors, and further that council directs staff to post the code of conduct for chief building officials and inspectors on the municipal webpage and to make print copies available at Town Hall.
Okay, thank you. Someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Ham. And I'll turn it back over to you, Josh.
Through you, your worship, and two members of council, throughout an audit of the town's administrative policies, it was determined that the town of Elmer employee code of conduct should be complementary to a code of conduct for the chief building official, and that's provided for in section 7.1 of the Building Code Act. Upon that realization, staff have undertaken an environmental scan of codes of conduct for CBOs and inspectors within comparable municipalities. And based on that environmental scan, we've developed a draft for council's review and consideration. And I do want to note that the introduction of this code of conduct is by no means reactive or meant to address any ongoing issue that currently exists within the building division of the town. Really, the intent here is to optimally comply with the Building Code Act and to ensure that we're continuing to promote and making available a document that describes to the community how we are going to continue to uphold appropriate standards of behavior and enforcement actions within the building department and their responsibilities under the Building Code Act.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Questions, comments, Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Josh, understanding that there are requirements under the Building Code Act, why would the same expectations of the chief building official not be covered under the employees' code of conduct? Why do we need two?
Go ahead, Josh.
Through you, your worship, and to Councillor Barber, that's an excellent question. My understanding is that the reason that this wasn't done earlier on is for that exact reason that you just stated. The town of Elmer does have an employee code of conduct, and I certainly share your comments on that. In that, really, they should be congruent. They should be the exact same. The reason for this report is again somewhat administrative in nature, in that we are trying to follow the Building Code Act to the letter. And that section 7.1 does advise that it's mandatory, and it seems to be par for the course in terms of what other municipalities are choosing to approve in terms of policy documents. So that's really the rationale for why it's before council this evening.
Go ahead, Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to follow up to Josh, in the event there was a conflict between the two codes, which one would apply?
Go ahead, Josh.
Through your worship and to Councillor Barber, I'm fairly confident that there are enough similarities between both codes that there'd be limited risk of conflict. Both code of conduct sort of end with the chief administrative officer as the sort of the key decision maker in terms of mitigating conflict and settling any inconsistencies. So I expect that we would be relying on the advice of the CAO and the interpretation of both documents. And as far as stipulations that are set out in the Building Code Act, they're generally quite black and white. But as far as this code of conduct goes, there's fairly limited direction in terms of what it needs to comprise of, short of mandating it. So in this case, again, we really did work to ensure that there are no major inconsistencies between both documents. And I expect that, you know, an analysis of an issue would have to be sort of taken on a case-to-case basis.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is Clerk 16-22.
That report, Clerk 16-22, entitled Request for New Street Names, Cottonwood Subdivision Phase 3, be received for information, and that council approve the request to name Street A in Phase 3 of the Cottonwood subdivision as Balsam Way, and further that council approve the request to add Mulberry, Hackberry, Birch, and Hickory to an inventory of acceptable names for future streets within the subdivision, and that council delegate authority to staff to approve requests and assign new street names for the remaining phases of the Cottonwood subdivision within the below criteria. That street names are tree themed, reflective of Carolinian species found in southwestern Ontario, and that species names are included within the native Carolinian species list, Schedule B of the town's tree management policy.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Charlton. And I will turn this back over to you, Josh.
Through you, your worship, and two members of council, Sifton Properties has requested naming approval for a proposed street location in the next phase of the Cottonwood subdivision. And in keeping with the current theme, Sifton has requested that Balsam Way be approved and assigned to replace Street A in Phase 3 of the subdivision. Sifton's also provided street names to be added to an inventory of acceptable names for future needs within the subdivision. These include Mulberry, Hackberry, Birch, and Hickory. So just to assist with expediting the process of these types of requests in the future, staff are requesting authority to approve these new street names within the set out criteria that was listed in the resolution. And again, so that criteria maintains that trees are tree themed, reflective of Carolinian species found in southwestern Ontario, and within the set out species list in the town's tree management policy. And I just wanted to note as well that staff will also be recommending that the developer include draft street names on future sort of high-level documents that are considered in public council deliberations for approval to ensure that council is aware of proposed names. So right now we're seeing that, you know, it says Street A on the plans that council's reviewed. If we're pre-approving agreed upon street names, we see no reason why they couldn't be included in those draft documents, just to give council an idea of what's coming down the pipe. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Josh. Are there questions for Josh? Councillor Barber, go ahead.
Just a comment, your worship. It's good to see that we're finally at this stage where at least we're naming the streets.
Are there any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, we're at new business and matters of urgency. And as we all know, Councillor Oslach's notice of motion. And so I'll turn this over to Josh.
I apologize. I just had a delay there. Mayor French, were you asking me to read the resolution?
Yes, please, so that we can move along with this.
Apologies. So this is moved by Councillor Oslach, and it's that staff of the town of Elmer bring back a report dealing with the further support of the Central Family Restaurant.
So basically what we're looking for is someone to second this. So, okay, yes. Councillor Chapman is willing to second it, Josh. And are there any questions or comments about this? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And Josh, that's all that's required, right?
Yes, that's correct, your worship.
Okay, just want to make sure we cover it all. The next item is readings of bylaws and proceedings thereon, and 3 readings.
That council approves and gives 3 readings to bylaw 1322, being a bylaw to adopt the estimates of the sums required for the town of Elmer for the year of 2022 and to strike the rates of taxation for same. And bylaw 1422, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of an agreement between the corporation of the town of Elmer and the town of Tillsonburg for the provision of fire communications dispatch services.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second, please. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Chapman, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Inquiries by members. Go ahead, Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Rob, the pedestrian crosswalk at John and South has not had an active switch for a number of months. Could you update us on that, please?
Through your worship, I'd have to check into that for Councillor Barber. I know we recently did some inspections of a few of the sidewalks to find that some of the buttons weren't working. And I know that we reached out to Earth, the contract, and I believe some of the buttons were unique to the controllers. So I'm not sure of this particular one. I'll have to look into that for you, Councillor Barber, and get back to you. But I know on some of the other areas, in case members of the public are wondering, getting the controller to talk with the push button has been a bit of a challenge for us, given the age of the infrastructure.
Go ahead, Councillor Barber.
Follow up, Your Worship. That is our most current crosswalk, and I would hope that the equipment is not obsolete after only a couple of years at most.
Yeah, I would agree. I suspect that's not the case in this location. There's other ones around town. I know that they're not functioning at the moment, but I can check into that for you, Councillor Barber, and get back to you for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further inquiries by members? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to statements and committee reports. Okay, don't see any hands up for that. There's no report of the mayor. Notice of motion. I don't believe there is one. So we'll move to meeting closed to the public.
That council moves into a meeting closed to the public at 7:50 p.m. to discuss the following matters. Director of Corporate and Legislative Services report Clerk 1322 respecting a proposed disposition of land. Report from the Chief Administrative Officer CAO 2522 respecting a staffing update, and a report from the Chief Administrative Officer respecting a memo. This was deferred from previous meeting respecting the CAO annual performance review.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Oh, sorry.
Apologies, Mayor French. I was just going to mention that these items are closed pursuant to section 239(2)(c) and D of the Municipal Act as amended, as the subject matter pertains to a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local boards. So that was item 15.1. And labor relations or employee negotiations, which is items 15.2 and 15.3.
Thank you for that, Josh. Someone to move and someone to second, please. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Ham. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.